going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to the Nine Hole podcast. We got some special guests here today, absolute legends, and I can't be more thankful for their time. I'm really excited to run them through some questions. This is obviously Randy Johnson, the big unit, and Brian Holman, just absolute legends in the game of baseball. Matt, how you guys doing? What's going on? Thank you for your time.
Well, we're awesome. I got maybe legend with a small L. Randy's got legend with all capital letters. So we're a little different status, but we'll take it.
It's incredible to have you guys here. Just run through some accolades. Obviously, Randy, we'll start with you, man. So 22 seasons in the MLB. Obviously, the accolades are insane. Baseball Hall of Fame, 2015, man. I was reading some stuff that you initially struggled with control early, right? That's online, right? You can look at the numbers, and you
Brian
absolutely
can
crushed
confirm that, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's how struggled I was in 1986, my first year in AA. I walked 122 batters. The next year, Randy came in 87, walked 128 batters. So I felt good about Randy being my teammate. So
I love that.
Between us, we walked so many people, it was crazy.
So you guys were dealing with not failure, right? I mean, obviously struggles. There are struggles within, the daily grind of baseball. How were you guys able to overcome stuff like that, right? You see it today, right? Maybe some pitchers will get the yips or something. You start struggling and then you can't find the zone. How were you guys able to kind of get back on track?
I think it's just all about persevering. I think for me, I often feel like I had enough good moments in my baseball life that I was always trying to repeat, and that's what needs to be done as a pitcher in baseball at any level. As a pitcher, you need to be able to repeat your performance, repeat your mechanics. And so it was extremely disappointing and painful for me when I would go out and perform at a high level in the minor leagues, or to at least my expectations and everybody else's. And then 5 days later, I didn't look anything like that pitcher. And everybody, including myself, was wondering why couldn't I repeat that performance? And it was all about mechanics for me. And I really didn't know that as much back then. But eventually, we got things ironed out. It took me a long time to get my mechanics ironed out. But when I did, and then became my own best coach and was able to click back into where I needed to be several years into the major leagues, I was able to start having some more fun in the game.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you were playing. It says you were an absolute stud in basketball coming up, high school and 2 years in college, right? So you were playing sports year round, not just baseball.
I was pretty athletic. I played Pop Warner football, quarterback. 4 years of baseball in high school, 3 years of basketball in high school, and then my senior year in high school, Livermore High, in Livermore, California. It's Northern California, about an hour east of Oakland. I got drafted out of high school by the Atlanta Braves in the 4th round, and I chose to go to college, the University of Southern California, and play for the legendary coach Rod Dato, who is now passed. But at that time, pretty legendary in college baseball. He had about 12 national championships under his belt. He had the likes of Tom Seaver and Fred Lynn and Dave Hostetter. When I went there, I played with Mark McGuire for a couple of years. He was the first baseman.
It's incredible.
But in college, I was coming out of high school having played basketball too. And I think I was okay at basketball at that time of my life, only because I was a little bit taller than everybody. It wasn't because I was more skilled in the game than everybody. It was because I was a little bit taller. Okay. So I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to play. But as I went into college and declined going to the Atlanta Braves and went to college to further my education and try to get a little bit better in baseball, I said that I didn't really care to play basketball anymore and I just wanted to concentrate on baseball.
That's incredible. Okay. So what were the benefits of playing multiple sports, do you think? Coming up obviously through high school, coming up through college, what did you think the benefit was to kind of, dabble in multiple sports as opposed to, maybe if you were just to focus solely on baseball, what's that do year round if you're throwing year round, maybe
Well,
not taking some time
you're
off?
using it, your skill level broadens because you're in playing different sports. The demands are different in different sports. You know, you use different parts of your body to be successful in a different sport, and so incorporating all of those attributes eventually, playing basketball, which made my footwork better, which made my coordination better.
I like that.
Inevitably, that might have helped me, get over to first base, field my position better. I never won a Gold Glove, so it probably didn't help me that much. But I just think doing lots of different sports is going to help your coordination and broaden your athletic ability to when you play one particular sport, whatever that season is, you can add all the other things that you've learned, I believe.
Okay. Nice.
One thing I'll add to that about RJ. RJ was, I mean, still is, but was very athletic. When you think about a pitcher who's 6'10", his arms and legs are super long, to be able to just cover first and field your position. I mean, it's hard throwing and getting downhill when you have that many moving parts. And so, like I said, mechanically, he became very good mechanically. I go back and I'll look at pictures of him when he was in rookie ball or A ball in the Expos, and you look at when he's several years into the big leagues with the Diamondbacks, he doesn't look anything the same. His delivery is very simple, but I think he had a lot more work to do because he was so tall and so long. But the cool thing is that because he was so athletic, he could parlay that into being a pitcher. And once he became a pitcher, and we were all throwers at one time, and once we became pitchers, then it wasn't fair. He could dominate. He could dominate great teams at will when he was on. And so it was great to watch that transition. But from an athletic perspective, Randy's very athletic for someone who's so tall and so lanky. I always laugh about, you think about how athletic baseball players are. It's usually because we played lots of other sports when we were in high school, and so we could play anything. You take a baseball player, you put him on a basketball court, a football, anything, and they can compete.
For sure.
But we laugh when you watch a football player, a basketball player, a gangster rapper throw a first pitch out of a baseball game. Is pretty ugly. So
Swing a bat. Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. I love that. So Brian, you're given lessons in instruction right now, right? Helping out on that front, right? Teaching the next generation of baseball players, man. Are you telling them to play multiple sports?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And
Okay.
I played multiple sports. I played basketball, football, took taekwondo, did everything until I was about a sophomore in high school. And then you got to remember back in the mid 80s, the radar guns were a little different. So by the time I was 16 years old, I was throwing 90 to 93 miles an hour. And then by the time I was 18, I was in the mid 90s. I didn't throw like Randy hard, but I still threw pretty hard back in those days. And so by the time I was a junior in high school, I had made the decision at that point that I was probably never going to play in the NBA. I was not going to play in the NFL. But with the way my arm worked, I had a chance to play in the major leagues. And so I chose the route to really, from a junior in high school on, to really focus on baseball. And I played multiple positions in baseball, but then by the time I was a senior, I was really throwing hard, and they said, you just need to play one position. So I really encourage. The only thing, honestly, and it's hard living in Texas because football in Texas is a religion. These people love football in Texas. But I can't begin to tell you how many times we have teams in play and kids break their thumbs, break their fingers, break their legs, hurt their ankles, hurt their heads. I am not a huge football fan from the perspective of injury and brain, but they all play it, so we have to deal with that animal. But I think playing multiple sports is very, very positive for athletes, especially baseball players.
Got you. Makes a lot of sense. So, an athletic director or two that I've actually talked to out here said that high school baseball players are transferring to different schools, different programs, different. If it's a private school, whatever it is, they're transferring out of their school just so they can kind of specialize or get year round coaching in baseball, right? So an athletic director or two, maybe they don't have the ability to give year round in season instruction. You know what I mean? Like go in the gym, right, and run an indoor practice or something like that. These kids are kind of just trying to specialize in baseball from a young age, and they're transferring out, right? So maybe they don't understand the benefits of.
Well, I think part of it is, you have academies. When Randy and I were growing up, we never had academies. We never had pitching coaches. We had nothing. We had Little League baseball and dads, and we were out there playing and throwing. And, for us, a great day was to get our first uniform, which was handed down from 6 different seasons, and a snapback hat with a mesh back. And now in the academies, like the academy that we're involved in, the kids get 3 hats, 3 uniforms. They play in amazing facilities, all turf fields. So it's a little different today, obviously, but you have kids specialize in baseball. And I think that you can't do it all year round. You need to take time off, and you need to rest your arm, and you need to do other sports. So I make my players take off from Thanksgiving until the first of the year, and we just kind of shut it down and don't throw very much. And if they are lessons, they're slow motion or balance drills or towel drills or something that's not taxing their arm very much. So you get a lot of parents who are just absolutely gung-ho on little Johnny being the next Mike Trout, and they play him all year round, and then they get Little League elbow or their growth plates get hurt or something. So we got to kind of be the voice of reason for those parents.
Makes sense. Randy, how do you feel about that, man? How are the off seasons for you?
I agree completely. I never played baseball all year round.
Okay.
When Little League baseball season was over, or Babe Ruth or high school, then I went to another sport. I wasn't using my arm to pitch anymore. I was giving my arm a chance to take a break.
Makes sense.
And I think in today's baseball, a lot of kids, hopefully understand that you can't pitch all year round. You got to give your arm a chance to heal, to take a break. And like what Brian is saying in his academy, you can do I suppose if you want to do baseball all year round, you can, like Brian said, you can take from Thanksgiving off until the beginning of the year, that window of 2 or 3 months, and not throw and do other things. You can work on your balance. You can work on your core exercises. You can understand how important mechanics are, loading up and direction and all that. But to go out there and throw, all year round, at some point, you're going to break down. And I feel it's to everybody's benefit. If you don't play another sport, then at least take time off from baseball and give your chance, give your body a chance to heal up and recover.
For sure.
And you get a lot of, being in youth sports and youth baseball, we see the worst of the worst where coaches are concerned. And you see a 12-year-old kid throw 105 pitches in a game, and 70 of them are curveballs, all to win a little plastic ring. So we try to be the voice of reason about that. And part of that, and the reason we're so focused on it, I think that coming up through the Montreal Expos organization with the coaches we had, old school coaches, they were tough, hard-nosed guys, but they taught us a lot about taking care of our bodies and working hard and competing. And so I try to push that onto the kids too, that, you're going to have to figure it out. Sometimes in today's game, the focus is so much on velocity and spin rate and all that stuff that they forget that if you don't throw strikes, you're going to struggle. Randy and I are the perfect example of when you can't throw strikes, it doesn't matter how hard you throw, because we both struggled in the minor leagues. But we had to learn how to pitch. And fortunately, we had some good pitching coaches that helped us out and got us to that point. So,
Gotcha. I love that. I love that. So, what were the things that you guys did aside from your talent, aside from your size, your athleticism, that separated you guys from the pack? Right, Randy, what were the things that you did outside of being the big unit, being a dominant athlete that kind of separated you from the pack? Talk to Jamie Moyer a little bit for about an hour the other week. He was talking to me about he used to keep a notebook. We talked about David and I talked a little bit about it on a past episode, but just keeping a notebook on hitters, right? 1 through 9 in the lineup, what you threw them in what situations. Like, I don't know, is there something that you maybe did off the field that I don't know separated you from the pack outside of just your athleticism?
I think over 22 years, you add and subtract, and you understand. You become more educated in the game, and over time you start doing things such as that. You hire someone that helps you with your recovery. You hire a nutritionalist. You hire a physical therapist. Taking notes and all that are important, but I would usually get the game chart from the pitcher that was recording my pitches and what I was throwing to all the batters and the results of the game. I would keep all those so I could go back and watch video and look at the game chart if I face the same team later in the year, or that hitter, and he may have been on another maybe be on another team. It's endless, the amount of things that are constantly developing and changing in 22 years. The first 5 or 6 years, I was just trying to stay at the major league level and throw strikes. So I wasn't doing anything other than what they were telling me to do.
Gotcha.
And eventually, when things started progressing and I started becoming more of a pitcher and more dependable, and understanding why I'm becoming dependable, because I'm being able to repeat my mechanics and throw strikes, well, then I started having more fun. When I started having more fun in the game, I wasn't beating myself up as much. And then I was broadening out there and understanding I'm competing now. This is fun. And then as time went on, how can I get better? You're always trying to reinvent yourself. I got in the major leagues when I was 25, and I ended my career when I was 46. Well, when I ended my career, I wasn't throwing 95 to 100. So somewhere in between that age range, I was morphing into a different type of pitcher.
Evolving.
Along the way, I can't go out there and think that I'm going to try to fool a young kid with a 91 mile an hour fastball and make it look like it's 100. So I have to be a little bit smarter. Along the way, when I was throwing 95 to 100, I was also becoming a better pitcher, understanding the quadrants of the strike zone and how to throw off-speed pitches, use both sides of the plate. That only made me a better pitcher when I did throw 95 to 100, let alone the last 3 or 4 years of my career when I was on the downside of my career, and when the wind was at my back, I was maybe throwing 91.
Okay. That's a perfect segue in this. When we teach, the emphasis is so much on velocity today. You work with young kids, say 10 to 14, and you focus so much on helping them learn how to command their fastball. Can they command their fastball to both sides of the plate? Can they throw a changeup? Can they throw strikes? And the parents are like, well, when's he going to throw a curveball, or when's he going to throw hard? And I'm like, look, nobody taught me how to throw strikes. And in the minor leagues, it was not uncommon for me to throw 120 pitches easy and walk 10 people. I was all over the place. And then I would have a game where I'd throw a complete game shutout. And it was just up and down. You just weren't consistent. And once we were able to find consistency and we learned how to pitch, then we started having a lot of success. But to try to get these parents to understand that teaching this kid to throw strikes and command his fastball, repeat his delivery, attack the strike zone. I tell them all the time, the hitter's not the enemy. The greatest hitters in the game fail 7 out of 10 times. The strike zone's the enemy. And if you throw strikes and they're quality pitches, you're going to have success. And like I said, once RJ discovered the strike zone, it was over. 5 Cy Young Award winners later and World Series MVPs and all the things that he accomplished. If he hadn't learned how to throw strikes, I'm a firm believer, as good as he was, it wouldn't have been as successful.
That's incredible. I love that. So what advice, if you guys could give just a little tip, a little inside idea, just to get ahead, right? Maybe a physical tip, maybe it's a mechanical thing, maybe on a pitch, I don't know, or a mental tip. Like if you could give a collegiate athlete or a high school athlete just a physical athletic tip, first off, what would you say to them, whether it's pitching or hitting? I don't know. Were you guys lifting all year round? Are you guys lifting in season? Is there a specific muscle group that, you guys would focus on when working out or anything?
Go ahead, RJ. I got something I want to say, but I want you to say it first. So,
I don't think there was a lot of lifting, but there was arm exercises. We did our rotator cuff exercises with little 5-pound dumbbells and little bean bags and bungee cords. Back in the early 90s, that was the extent of the weightlifting back then. And then as time went on, after I had my first back surgery, I think it might have been 1994, maybe. I don't remember the year in Seattle, but I had my first back surgery, and the gentleman that helped me with my rehab was doing all these balancing exercises and core stabilization exercises. And I didn't understand why we were doing so much of that. But inevitably, you create velocity from your core strength. And I didn't understand that in the 90s. And the exercises that I was doing then, nobody was doing. I was doing all kinds of core strengths and balancing exercises. And now that's the staple of everybody's exercise and routine. So it was actually maybe kind of a blessing to have a back surgery, I guess, because the information that I was taught, was pretty valuable. And then, it was learning that and then, going on to the next area that would make me recover faster. Inevitably, you start at ground zero and you're at 100% in your tank, if you will. And by all-star break, what you're trying to do every fifth in between your starts is get back to 100%. But obviously, it's nearly impossible to do that. Your body's breaking down every start. But the more you can get closer to that, the more you'll have in the tank inevitably at the end of the year. So I hired a massage therapist. I did a lot of hydro work in a Swimex. I made sure I was eating right. These are all things that happened over 22 years. It didn't all happen right away because the first thing that needed to happen was I needed to throw strikes. Yeah. And then it was me wanting to get better. Someone might be able to throw strikes at 100 miles an hour and they may think that they're as good as they're going to be. Well, that's not the case. You never know how good you're going to be in this game. And there's lots of kids that throw 100 miles an hour. What do you do that's a little bit different? If you have 5 pitchers in a room and they all are about the same size and they're all right-handed and they all throw 95 to 100, what sets you apart from the other 4 guys, the other 4 pitchers in the room? You got to be able to do something that's a little bit different, whether it's your mindset, your willingness to go beyond where you've been before. whether it's your leadership, whether it's your ability to understand and learn right away, things like that. I mean,
It's awesome.
the one thing that when I was in the minor leagues with Brian is I did see a lot of pitchers that no that were like light. I thought they were light years ahead of me with their mechanics. And I mean, they were smooth. They were able to repeat their mechanics. They had a good arm slot. They had multiple pitches that they could throw for strikes, and they could do it. To me, it looked like whenever they needed to be able to do it. That may not have been the case for Brian, as you said. We were both a little wild. I probably was a little bit wilder. But seeing someone like Brian or other pitchers that I played with in the minor leagues throughout the Expos organization, there was always pitchers that looked like they were so polished and they were way ahead of me with their mechanics and their pitches. And it was just, how am I ever going to get to that level? That's where I need to be.
Gotcha.
So really, in order to tell somebody what to do, you need to understand you almost got to start at ground zero with your mechanics. Are you throwing strikes? Can you throw strikes at will with all your pitches? And then if you can, then you move to the next. How is your workout program after you pitch in a game? How's your recovery? These are all things that over 22 years I learned from trainers. I learned from my physical therapist on, hey, why don't you try a hyperbaric chamber and see if that helps you, getting in a Swimex and swimming, where you have, no body weight on your body, so no resistance. And so, that was probably one of the biggest things that helped me with my range of motion and getting me back to, ready to pitch 5 days later was getting in a Swimex and having someone get my range of motion back in my shoulder and get and work on my shoulder. And just the amount of things that a person can learn in today's game is endless. And to each pitcher, some need more help, probably. Some pitchers maybe want more help. Only you know what you need to know. And sometimes too much information is probably not the road you need to go down either. Sometimes you just need to go out and execute and see what you can do on your own, and then kind of pick and choose what avenues you need to have help in.
That's perfect. That. And what I wanted to say is that what I learned with the Expos organization is when we all had good stuff. I mean, it wasn't like we were just up there just throwing slop. We had good stuff, but you didn't have great stuff every game. You might have mediocre stuff. So what the Expos taught and what we try to teach kids at Texas Edge Baseball is important, that you got to learn to compete with what you have that day. You may not have great stuff. Maybe your breaking ball isn't as good, or your fastball's not doesn't sink as much. You go to the mound and you learn to compete with what you have that day. If every time you throw a pitch, your biggest concern is what was the velocity, what was the spin rate, what was this, what was that? Technology is great and information is great. But if you throw the ball to the backstop at 100 miles an hour, how does that help you? So we work a lot trying to get kids to understand there's this thing called competition. There's 3 things you can control as a player: how hard you work, how hard you play, and what you do off the field that can either positively or negatively impact 1 and 2. Other than that, you have no control over your coaches, teammates, parents, nothing. Just control you. One thing Randy said, I was very fortunate. My wife, Jamie, and Randy invited us to his Hall of Fame induction, and it was an amazing time, just so incredible because, I had seen him at the lowest level of the minor leagues, and he had seen me, and then to get to see him to be inducted. And I think it was the night before, Randy, I can't remember for sure, you did a Twitter thing, and there was a dad that sent you a tweet, and he said, RJ, I have a 12-year-old son. If you can give my 12-year-old son any advice, what would it be? You know what he said? I use this all the time. It's so great. He said, tell him to have fun. He's 12.
I love
There
that.
was really no great advice. I love that. I still use that today. Have fun in the game. I mean, I had fun in the big leagues. I had more fun than anybody. I loved to pitch. I loved to compete. Randy loved to pitch and loved to compete. And I think for us when we were younger, one of the reasons we struggled was because we had such a hard time accepting failure. We didn't want to fail, and we worked really hard. But when you go out and you work hard and then you don't have success, you get frustrated, man. You get like, ugh. So learning how to do that was really helpful. But again, I can't stress enough. Parents, let your kids have fun. Let them have fun in the game of baseball. The game is a very short-lived game, and it doesn't last very long. And most kids from 14 to 16, we lose. They go off and do other sports. They discover girls or jobs or whatever. And pretty soon, baseball is no longer a hobby. It has to become somewhat of a career so they can go on to the next level if they want to. So have fun, enjoy yourself, work hard, compete like a crazy lunatic when you walk on the field, and good things are going to happen to you.
So David and I kind of hit on some things in the past episodes that we've done about the mental game. We've been getting some questions from athletic directors, around here in the state of Ohio, specifically about the mental game. When David and I were going through the Mariners system, it was kind of a change in leadership, right? So the Jack Zarenzik era, I think that ended in like 2015, something like that, going into 16, and then it just DePoto came in, right? There was Andy McKay at the helm of the minor league system, right? So he was a big time, mental skills guy, psychology, all that stuff. We had a bunch of mental skills trainers and mental skills coaches around. Started doing meditation and stuff. Started really taking like the mental side of the game a little bit more serious there. And I feel like, in my experience, more and more, it's become more and more prevalent. Like everybody's starting to do it. Just kind of talking to maybe a high school athlete, high school baseball player, high school athlete of any sport, or a collegiate baseball player, collegiate athlete of any sport. What would you give them in regard to like a mental tip? What's something that they could take from this? Maybe some advice from you, just that they can start implementing just to strengthen their mental side, just to give them maybe a mental edge.
There is no such thing as an easy fix. There is no such thing as I push this button and this happens. It's called grind, hard work and grind.
Okay.
And what I try to tell kids today is like, growing up, I grew up in kind of a tough background, and you fought and fought and fought and battled. And baseball was our world, man. We fought. And so the failure that you experience as a ball player, you need to learn how to use that as fuel. Today, more ball players, because we live in this instantaneous society. If I need an answer, I Google it, or I go to YouTube, or I ask Alexa. There is no such thing. There's no reset button. When your video game you're struggling, you can't do that in baseball. So the fact that you put on Facebook something and somebody gives you 2 thumbs up immediately, that's instantaneous affirmation. In baseball, you don't have that. You have to work your flipping tail off to get to a point where not only are you physically ready, you're fundamentally ready, but you're also mentally prepared that when you walk on that field, you are going to do everything you can that day to win. You don't always feel good every day when you wake up. You don't always feel strong. Sometimes you're sore. Sometimes you're tired. When you're a Major League Baseball player playing 162 games and you play every day, there is no way that you can feel great every day.
No
I
chance.
tell kids, when you're a pitcher, let's say you have 10 starts. Of those 10 starts, you're going to have 2 starts where you dominate. I mean, just absolutely dominate. Everything's working, and you just go out and crush a team. Then you're going to have 2 starts where you suck. Where it doesn't mean you can't pitch. It's just you suck that day. Nothing works, and you got to figure out how to grind through it. What makes a great pitcher is the 6 starts between greatness and suck. How you are able to take that and mentally and physically and fundamentally grind through. Think about what and this is just me from a starting pitcher. A starting pitcher's job, you need to be simple. Throw strikes, get outs, and keep your team in the game. That's your job, period. And as I tell kids all the time, being a coach, we're in the simplicity business. We tend to complicate the crap out of things as baseball players. It's not complicated. The game can be complicated, and I think they complicate the game a lot more just by the amount of information given. And sometimes you just need to get on the mound, toe the rubber, and pitch and attack the zone with what you have, and quit worrying about all this other stuff. I know that with rapsodos and everything else, the minute sometimes a pitcher throws, they look right back, and the first thing they do is, what's my velocity, what's my spin rate?
Yeah, yes.
You know who tells you that, whether your stuff is good or not? Who tells you whether your stuff is good or not? The hitter. The hitter tells you. And if your stuff is good that day, you're gonna know it. If your stuff isn't good that day, you have to make an adjustment, and you'll know. Pretty simple.
Makes sense to me. In your experience, like where you're at right now, seeing it from the other side of the game, right? So you obviously went through your high school career, your collegiate career, minor league career, major league career, and you were a dude, right? So now you're helping out the next generation of baseball players, working with younger guys, girls, right? But how should they separate themselves? What are coaches and scouts looking for out of these young players? Like, what are they really looking for? Let's say a Division I college coach shows up to a high school baseball players game, or a college, or not a college scout, but a Mariner scout shows up to a collegiate baseball players game. Like, what are they looking for? What can they do to kind of just maybe confirm the reason why that player, that scout or that coach is there? Like,
well, I can tell you what I look for. I mean, I've scouted for a long time. I've worked with, I can't even begin to tell you how many thousands of kids I've worked with, and how the handful of so many kids I've worked with who've gone to college or to the minor leagues or to the big leagues. I mean, it's minuscule. I tell people, to get to the big leagues, you're a unicorn. To be able to stay there is really hard. And what happens is that today's player, like I said, the only thing, and Randy touched on, the only thing that's the separator is work ethic. You can have all the same stuff. Who's going to outwork who's going to learn how to pitch better? The stuff that you have to help parents understand is that when I go out and look at a kid, it's easy to see what he throws. You look at the radar gun, he says he's throwing 95. You can see that he's 6'6". You can see that he's athletic. You can see that his arm works. He can spin a curveball. You can see his back leg come around and his foot higher than his hip. Is he really finishing over his front leg? What I love to see a kid get his ass kicked. I love to go to a game and see this dude on the mound just get the snot beat out of him, because I want to watch his reaction. Is he an excuse player? Is he throwing his hands up when pitches are close and he doesn't get the pitch? Is he griping at the umpire if his teammate makes an error? Is he looking back and going, dude, what are you thinking? Or is he the guy that no matter what, he grinds it through and keeps his team in the game and lifts his teammates up?
I love that.
I don't want to draft mental midgets. I want to draft competitors. And you look around, you see how many thousands upon thousands of kids are playing this game. And there's so many of them that are just the same as far as their stuff goes. But they're all different mentally, physically, fundamentally, pitchability-wise, they're all different. I'm going to give you a stat, and it's kind of interesting. I was telling this to Dad the other day. Dad comes in and he tells me that his 9-year-old's the next Mike Trout. I said, no, he's not. And he goes, oh, no, he's really good. He's 9. I said, no, he's not. He's not good. He's 9. He's not good. I said, you compare all great players by major league players. So this is a crazy stat. So of all of the kids that play in the Dallas-Fort Worth area from ages 7 to 14 on any given weekend, it's thousands upon thousands upon thousands. Of that number, only 2% will play high school baseball, because a lot of them, 9, 10 years old, they're done playing. By the time they're 13, they've had enough. I don't want to do this anymore. Then only 5% of high school players go on to play collegiately.
That 5% of that 2%.
of that 2% go on to play collegiately. And that could be at a 6A school, 5A school, 4A school, whatever. And that collegiately could be junior college, NAIA, NC Division 1, 2, or 3, whatever, right? So the funnel begins to get very small. And then to get to pro ball is astronomically low as you go, right? So I was telling this dad, I said, I want you to think about something. I was a first round draft pick out of high school. I was a 16th player picked in the country. Roger Clemens was the 19th player picked that year. So I guess I laughed because I said the Expos didn't get near as good a deal as the Red Sox did. But then I get in the minor leagues, and you've got me and Randy Johnson and Larry Walker and John Dobson and Sergio Valdez and John Trotwine. And I can go on and on. Gary Wayne, the guys that I played with that got to the big leagues. But along the way, Ian, we got our butts kicked. I mean, kicked. And now this gets really crazy. I said, when I played, there were 26 major league teams, not 30. There were 24 men on the roster at that time. So there were 624 major league players in the world, the greatest, best players in the world, 624 of them. Each team had 10 pitchers. So you had 260 major league pitchers. Of that, 5 of them were starters. So you had 130 starters. So at one time, I was one of the best 130 starting pitchers in the world.
That's right.
And I still got my ass kicked. So when you look at how hard the game of baseball is, you have to understand that in order to get it to any level, the only separator is work ethic. And even at times, work ethic doesn't always going to compute. So I tell kids all the time, there's a process-oriented player and there's a results-oriented player. The results-oriented player, he's the guy that only is satisfied when he gets a good result. But you being a hitter, how many times did you have a game where you went 0 for 4 and barreled up 4 líneas and didn't get on base?
Yep, a lot.
Did you do anything wrong?
No, I did everything I could
Everything
in my power. You know what I mean?
It's called frickin' baseball.
Yeah, absolutely.
The process is hard. So if you're a process-oriented player and you can live – I mean, I watched Edgar Martinez one time go 0 for 11 and hit the snot out of the ball 11 straight times and not get on base. And then I've seen guys go 4 for 4 and not get a ball out of the infield.
Yeah,
somehow, somewhere they got on, right?
Yeah.
So the result really wasn't very good, but the result in their mind was good because they look on Game Changer of the book and it says they're 4 for 4, but the at-bats were terrible and the process wasn't good. So this game of baseball, I often laugh. I'm a baseball memorabilia collector. And early in baseball was spelled in 2 words, base and ball. And the reason they did that was because it took 2 4-letter words to describe baseball. That's how hard baseball is. So
makes sense to me.
Yeah, so we work through that. So it's just a part of trying to get parents to understand that if their son does not have work ethic, if they are not out on the field standing apart in everything that they do, they're not going to be noticed. And if they're throwing bats, throwing helmets, acting like little 2-year-olds, we just mark them off. We just don't have any interest in that.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I love that. Appreciate that. So I got another, this last question here is from one of the athletic directors, out here near me in Ohio. The problems that high school kids are facing nowadays, right? The adversity that they have to go through and overcome in order just to, play sports, go about their lives. It's a lot different than it used to be, at least for me when I was coming up, right? Social media plays a lot into it. There's a lot of negative impacts on social media, especially talking about, student athletes, right? Their kids are young and impressionable. How would you overcome obstacles as a student athlete, when it comes to seeing things on social media or just like, not feeding into it? Maybe you see, a player, a pitcher's pumping 100 miles an hour online, right? You're trying to compete with that, right? You're trying to compare with everything you see. I mean, I have a few things on here. Negative impacts of social media, right? Mental health is big nowadays. How would you, strengthen that? Facing adversity, overcoming obstacles, having difficult conversations. Like, what would you give in regard to advice on overcoming these things? Talking about, all this.
So I hate social media, especially for young teens, athletes, girls, athletes, whatever. They're so caught up in what other people think of me.
Yeah.
Did I get 2 thumbs up on this? What if this person doesn't like me? How many likes did I get versus dislikes? When I played, obviously, there was no social media. I had no computers. We had no cell phones. We had no internet. We had nothing. And that was great. We had the paper. And if you read the paper, you get blasted. And if you got blasted, you had a choice. Do you really believe that nonsense? Or do you believe your own thing? Don't get too high in what you read and don't get too low. The reason I hate social media for young players is that too many times a young player will start drinking his own Kool-Aid and believing all this stuff. And then he goes out and he does something dumb on social media. He says something dumb or he posts something dumb.
Yep, irreversible.
He's irreversible. And he's just a kid. He might say something completely stupid because he's a kid. And yet 20 years later or 15 years later or whatever, he's having to go through sensitivity training and apologize for something he said at 14. We've all said dumb things at 14. So what I tell kids is, if possible, stay off social media. Get rid of social media. Because social media, how in the world did I get drafted first round? There was no social media. There was no video. There was nothing.
Yeah.
People find you. So, or you do something really dumb, and the next thing you know, you make a gesture to a fan, or you say something. Well, that's on there forever now. So, bottom line is, I don't give a rat's ass what people think about me. I could care less. All I care about is getting on the mound, doing my thing, working hard, and pitching. If that's not good enough, so be it. I'm not here to impress you on social media or please you on social media. I'm here to work my butt off and go out and compete. If that's not good enough, hang with them. I don't care.
Yeah.
And that's just, you just got to get to that point.
Them.
Hang with them. That's it.
And
so, parents will come to me and say, "Oh yeah, we got to get him on this site and this site and that site." I said, "No, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't. Stop. You're going to be there. There's plenty of stuff out there. I think in some cases that video and some certain things for colleges, but there are no Sid Finches out there. There is no unturned athlete. They are going to be found if you are good enough. They're going to find you. Social media, when you start playing for the radar gun, or I say you start playing for the exit velocity or the launch angle, or you start playing for social media, you're not playing the game for the right reasons."
No, that makes a ton of sense. How about what about overcoming adversity, right? So we actually had somebody ask us a question and we addressed it. I believe it was last episode. These kids, they go through the school day, right? I'm talking about high school athletes. They go through the school day, they go through all their classes, and then they have their baseball game after school, right? So excuse me, they'll deal with issues, they'll fail a test or they'll get dumped or something during the day, and then they have to go lock it in for baseball, right? What kind of tips, tricks, I don't know, mindset type things that you would give, to a young athlete to overcome adversity and kind of just like get mentally locked back in? I don't know.
I learned this early on, and I'll tell you how I learned it. And I think that, Mickey Mantle said it best. He said, "No rich kid will get to the big leagues." Now, I don't mean that to be negative. It's just that they don't have the adversity. So when I was growing up, I grew up poor. I grew up super poor. And unfortunately, my dad struggled with alcohol. And so I would go to work with my dad. And I tell this story quite often. I would go to work with my dad. We lived in Denver, Colorado, and we would go clear across Denver to a job site. And I'm 13 years old. I got a baseball game that night. I can't think of anything else but playing that game. I loved to play. And so next thing I know, my dad had a lot to drink that day and he couldn't drive. And my baseball game starts at 7:00 and it's now 4:00 in the afternoon and I'm starting to panic. I'm thinking I got to get to my game. So I did what most 13-year-olds do. I got in the car and I white knuckled it through rush hour traffic in Denver, driving at 13 to get to my game.
No way.
And when I got to my game, I am a mess, man. And I'd walk out and my coaches knew what was going on. And one of my coaches had peanut butter and jelly sandwich. He'd have a Gatorade for me. And he'd say, "I know everything's okay. You're in a good spot. Now walk across the lines and take all of that aggression and fear and anger and frustration out on that other team. And I did, man. I played like a man
I
possessed,
love that.
all out all the time. Kids today need to learn that failure is not a thing that happens to them every once in a while. Failure happens every day. The two things you cannot fear as a baseball player, you cannot fear failure, and as a pitcher, you can't fear contact. So you have to be able to embrace failure. Okay, I suck today. Admit it. Go on. When my kids come in after a weekend and I say, how did you do? They'll say, oh, well, I did okay. I did this. I said, no, how did you do? Were you mediocre? Were you good? Were you terrible? If you were terrible, tell me, Coach, I sucked today. I sucked Saturday. Okay, then let's work on it. Admitting that. Unfortunately, we live in this culture that if you fail, man, I don't want to admit that.
That's
I
right.
don't want to admit that I messed up. Well, hey, you messed up. You're human. So what I learned from what I grew up being poor and struggling, I tell kids all the time, I was fortunate. I have two brothers and we had bats and balls and gloves and we played baseball every day. We had nothing distracting us. And if a kid can go out and play baseball the way we used to play wiffle ball in the summer in the backyard, in the grass, no shoes, no shirt,
Living the
drinking
dream.
Kool-Aid, living the dream, having fun, playing the game the way you want, instead of thinking all of this, oh my gosh, I gotta. Go out
Oh,
and do it because I wanna.
no
And that
kidding.
changes the whole perspective of being a baseball player.
I love it. I love that. Talk a little bit about these kids are going through, they're grinding, they're struggling, they're going through this adversity, and then the little voice in their head, their self-talk, their inner self-talk starts kind of getting maybe a little negative or a little doubtful. They start maybe doubting their abilities, doubting their ability on the field, right? That maybe it translates over into off the field. Then you're in a mental funk, for indefinitely, right? What kind of insight could you give maybe on managing your self-talk from a high school athletic point of view to a collegiate baseball player point of view, or even a pro player? Like what kind of insight or maybe a tip you could give about just getting you back to center?
Sure. So I took Taekwondo for a long time. So I'd fight in Taekwondo tournaments and everything else. And I had an instructor one time tell me, he said, listen, you can be a 10th degree black belt and you can know all the moves. That doesn't necessarily mean you know how to fight. You can be a pitcher or a hitter or whatever that has all that move. Doesn't mean you know how to play or compete. So the guy, he'd say, if you walk into a bar and next thing you know, this big 6'8" guy, 300 pounds that could squash you like a grape comes up and he wants to fight you. He said, you either walk away or you pick up a chair and you hit him in the head with it. That's how you fight. You don't worry about whether I'm going to kick him or be perfect. You
Makes
fight,
sense. Yeah.
right? So when you go out on a baseball field, you got to learn to fight with what you have that day and who you're facing. You have to know that you are just as good as they are, and you have to believe that. The thought process for most baseball players who do everything that they need to do. Think about, you had a routine when you played. I had a routine when I played. Clear down to what I ate for breakfast, what I wore to the ballpark, what I ate for dinner the night before, all that stuff. If I took those 5 days and I prepared and I worked and worked and worked and I had my routine, and once I got into my routine and I did everything I was supposed to do that day, don't you feel mentally better about yourself? Of course you do. 100%. Now you're ready to go compete. I feel good. I've done everything I can.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
Now you
so
just go out
many
and
kids
compete.
today, they show up, they haven't done a single thing. So I had a kid, 14-year-old the other day, hadn't pitched very good. And I said, all right, you haven't pitched very good. Tell me what you've done the last 2 weeks to make yourself better. Have you run? Have you lifted? Have you done core work? Have you done towel drills? Have you done your bands? Have you done your slow motion? Have you worked on your mechanics? Answer was no to everything. I said, so why are you mad about the results that you do not get by the work you do not put in?
Just expecting it almost.
Expecting it. And that's kids today, unfortunately. A lot of them, I push this button, I get these likes, I don't have to work very hard at it. And that's just not the game today. Baseball is getting harder and harder because it's shrinking. I don't know if you know that. The game is shrinking.
Yes. They're taking away minor league teams.
Yeah.
It's taking away levels.
Yep, levels. It's getting harder and harder. You don't
Yeah.
see baseball in the inner cities very often anymore. Now you've got more Latin players, more Asian players, more players from all over the
Yeah.
world are now coming into play. I
More
mean, we had
competitive.
players from all the world too, but we didn't have at this. So now you're getting fiercer competition in a smaller uh, package. And if boys, I'm just telling you, if you don't go out and work your tail off every day to be the best player you can be, you are not going to get to a high level.
I love that.
Period.
That makes total sense to me. That makes total sense to me. Brian, that's all I got. Those are the only questions I had, man. I love that. Is there anything else you want to add? Is there anything else maybe you want to touch on? I mean, obviously you have a bunch of experience in all of this, man. What's something that you're teaching, your teams or your boys, like, that they're getting the leg up, or they're getting, ahead of their competition, as opposed to people that, are out here in Ohio? Like, maybe what kind of, inside training technique, or maybe, I don't know, a certain type of exercise. I don't know. You guys are able to be outdoors year round. I assume, right? In nice weather. Kids here, they don't really have that opportunity. It's snowing and it's cold and stuff. Like, um, I don't know. Are you guys? Is there any type of drills that you guys do? Maybe that set some things
Well, there's a
apart.
lot, like I tell kids all the time, and you look at we come from this just insane big baseball family. I mean, my nephew just threw a complete game shutout the other day in the state tournament.
David
He's
told
the
me.
last of the Holmans, right? I mean, you got this all the way down. We just all these Holman pitchers, right? And what we've always tried to preach to them is that failure or getting your butt kicked can be the greatest motivator in the world if used properly. And I tell kids all the time, they get together and I said, let me ask you a question. When you pitch bad or you play bad, guess what? I hate to tell you this, nobody cares. Maybe your mom and dad and maybe you, but think about it. Your teammates care, but not really, because if you don't play good, that means they get to play. The other team doesn't care. The other fans don't care. The umpire doesn't care. He just wants his $40 and leaves. So nobody cares. The only person that really truly cares is you. So if you don't go out every day and work hard and you struggle, get off the pity party wagon. Nobody cares whether you're upset or mad. You have to figure out how to embrace it, accept it, and use that failure as fuel. And once you learn to do that, man, the sky's the limit in anything that you do in life. But if you sit around and go, poor me, woe's me, why not, how comes, not fairs, that's a waste of stinking time, man. And I believe that in baseball, you have so many coaches that are so derogatory and just on kids. Nobody ever should have to encourage you to work harder. You either want to work hard or you don't. In fact, if I have to push you to work harder, that should be an insult to you. In
Yeah.
fact, David one time goes, Dad, why didn't you push me harder? Well, why? Why would I push you harder? Nobody pushed me harder. Yeah. 90% of education is encouragement. If you can encourage, and then you give those people the tools they need to go and do, they can do anything. So of all of the years and all of the people involved in baseball, we have worked with thousands upon thousands of kids, and they all have something in common. One, they're all different. And two, none of them don't like to be encouraged. So encourage them to the best you can, help them work hard, and then eventually from ages 14 to 16, they got to make a decision whether or not they're going to want to try to play at the next level. So
that's fantastic, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for your time. Man, this is awesome.
Well, I'm glad you guys do it. You guys are doing fun stuff, and remember those times we go to Arrowhead Grill and just have a great time. And those people, Rufus, those people in your lives, you just cherish that because you look back at it now and it's awesome stuff, right? So just remember that what you guys are doing. I'm happy to help you guys any time, and I can't even begin to tell you how fortunate I was to play in the era of baseball I played in. The 80s and the 90s of Major League Baseball was incredible.
Beautiful thing.
The players I got to play with, I got to watch King Griffey Jr. and Edgar Martinez hit every day. I got to watch Randy Johnson pitch. I got to play against Tony Gwynn and Barry Bonds and Boggs and Molitor and Yount and Canseco and McGuire and Ripken. I can go on and Mattingly. I can go on and on. It was an amazing era of baseball. And they were just pure, hard-nosed baseball players.
What were they like? Was it all business? So were they businessmen on the field, or were they goofing off, not watching the game, cracking
No.
jokes in the dugout?
Well, we had jokes and we had fun, but let me tell you something. One of the things that I see in baseball that is different for me was how much they fraternize with the other team and how much they, pat each other on the back. Hey, how's it going? When I played and I walked across the field, I hated you. I
Yeah.
hated hitters. I didn't care what you were doing. I didn't want to see you come up or I wasn't going to say, hey, great job. All I wanted to do was beat you. And I think today it's just a little different game. I'm not saying it's a bad game. I'm just saying it's a different game where you see a lot of guys buddy, doing other stuff. When I played, this is kind of interesting last thing. We had no video. We couldn't watch hitters. We literally had a spray chart of colored pencils to watch whether hitters on certain counts hit ground balls or fly
What?
balls. I would look at the box scores before Baltimore came in, and I would say, how's Ripken hitting? Is Ripken on fire right now? So if I have men on second and third with 2 outs and a base open, is it probably better to
Pitch around?
pitch around him a little bit? You got to understand that this game is about winning baseball games. So you get to that level. So we had to really learn and talk to each other and talk baseball. We went out and talked baseball constantly. We spent tons of time in the locker room talking baseball. And I don't see that today.